I have met Bill Clinton, but
Oh,
briefly, and I didn't talk with him about Whitewater, to be clear. So
was that in Atlanta
here,
when he was doing something at the Carter Center?
yeah, yeah. I met him. I met him in Atlanta. But you know, if you ever meet a high octane politician, honestly, unless you're doing a PR thing with them or giving them money, it's not really going to be an in-depth conversation. History is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. My ruffle a few feathers, when people talk about Clinton corruption and scandals, they're usually not talking about the proven stuff. They're usually not talking about the Lewinsky scandal. They're talking about other things that are largely considered conspiracy theories or considered cover ups. Sometimes both. There's a Venn diagram here. One of the biggest ones is the Clinton body count. You've heard of it. Several of our fellow listeners have written in asking about this, and we talked about this briefly in our 2016 episode, I want to say, part two, election conspiracies.
It's the concept that potentially the Clintons, at least according to these allegations, have had over 50 people killed, which is very salacious. A lot of the allegations you'll see about this thing are paper thin at best, but it is something worth looking into. We're talking about political assassinations here from people who
Right.
got too close to the Clintons or knew too much.
And you know, this is an American phenomenon, or it's common in American culture because we know that objectively crimes can be covered up, have been covered up, and there are generations worth of theories that the powerful have assassinated those speaking truth to them or exposing things they would rather stay hidden. This this starts or really gathers steam in 1994. A guy named William Dannemeyer, who was a former representative, he writes a letter to leaders of Congress and he says, look, there are 24 people who have died, quote, under other than natural circumstances, and I can tell you they're connected to the Clintons in one way or another, not all in the same way, and there needs to be a hearing about this. There needs to be an investigation. His list of suspicious deaths, as he called them, it turns out, if you look at kind of the genesis of this, if you trace the etymology of it, like you would trace the origin of a word, it all comes from one list compiled by a former Indianapolis lawyer named Linda Thompson. In 1993, the year before the letter goes out, Thompson quits her general practice to run a for profit group called American Justice Federation. What do we say about innocuous names? so, so American Justice Federation. They're a for-profit group. They're very much champions of pro-gun causes and are known for propagating a lot of conspiracy theories, kind of InfoWars style, through a online bulletin board, a radio show, and then, of course, sales of newsletters and videos. So we found the source that this arrives from, but like you said, Matt, how did it balloon to 50 plus people? And I also another question: how does this accusation have so much staying power? It's still kicking around today. A Georgia politician named Marjorie Taylor Greene recently co-signed it, and there were other folks. There were folks in the media who were who really wanted to push this story without maybe investigating it as much as they should have. Is Newsmax publisher Christopher Ruddy. Now, who died? Who's on this list? That depends on who you ask. There are multiple versions of the list now, such that there's not really one canonical version, we could call it. And in each death, the story goes, these associates, colleagues, or normal citizens were just about to testify against the Clintons, only to die in mysterious circumstances. While the list does have a lot of different additions and remixes. There are several names that pop up multiple times. We talked about a few of them previously. One example would be Vincent W. Foster, former deputy White House counsel. He was found dead right outside D.C. in July of 1993, July 20th. There was an autopsy that ruled he died due to suicide. He took his own life. He was shot in the mouth, no other wounds. His death was ruled a suicide by five separate investigations.
Yeah, but I mean, there's still weirdness there, guys. And I can't look away from the Vince Foster thing. It's so weird. This dude grew up across the street from the Clintons. He was very prominent in Arkansas when Bill Clinton was doing his thing over there as governor. So, and he's even the person who got Hillary Clinton into the Rose law firm that we mentioned in our previous episode. Like, he was the mentor for Hillary Clinton. So he definitely knew about some skeletons, right? I mean, he must have, just by the nature of his work and his proximity to them. It feels weird to me. I'm not saying that you can conclusively prove that he was killed because, again, of those 5 investigations, Ben, but it's still odd to me.
But again, like they were always bringing in people from their Little Rock inner circle and giving them jobs and replacing people in the administration. Like there was this whole scandal with like the travel team or whatever, where they replaced, kind of unceremoniously replaced these, appointees or these employees there with, folks they knew from back in Little Rock. And I spent a bit of the morning watching the C-SPAN a presentation, I guess, of this guy named James Stewart, who wrote a book called Bloodsport that was about the kind of Clinton dynasty and all of these scandals and stuff. And there's a really interesting part of the Q&A where this very southern Little Rock sounded gentleman in the audience, and it's in New York, it's at the 92nd Street Y, he says, I got to tell you, sir, I found your book to be a bit of a snooze because, of course, this is just how it's done in Arkansas. Everybody scratches each other's backs, and, it's in it for the cronies, and, everyone's trying to enrich each other, and people are just pretty bold about it. And the guy's like, well, sir, you may have found it a snooze because you're so close to this and know all about it. The guy was talking about how he had like a, mother-in-law who's judges and stuff like that, like all these close ties. Everyone else didn't know about it, and I certainly didn't find it to be a snooze. But, man, it's true. Little Rock and Arkansas politics, very back-scratchy. And, you do me a favor, I'll do you one.
Not every government is Singapore, it turns out. With Foster, I want to say that part of the circumstances leading to his death are pretty tragic and involve mental health. He was suffering from depression, but he was very concerned that if he saw a psychiatrist, it would cost him his security clearance, which is a thing that can happen to people.
But we just have to be careful because if, just because someone is depressed doesn't mean they killed themselves, right? It's like one of those things, like it's a possibility. It leans more credence to it, right? It's just, I don't know.
They need more evidence than that, though.
So, that's what I was going to say. Like, this is something that could be considered a factor to think about, but it is far from a conclusive thing. And for people who do believe that Foster was murdered or maybe driven to suicide, which is another idea, then those 5 separate investigations, to that perspective, are only going to be 5 different iterations of a cover-up, right? So then the question becomes one of influence. Who could have that amount of influence over 5 separate investigations? This is only one, again, of 50-something people. We also mentioned Seth Rich in the past. He was murdered. He was a DNC, Democratic National Committee staff member, and folks started speculating that Hillary Clinton had arranged his death. If you dig a little deeper past the headlines there, what you'll find is the heart of that speculation is based on a Fox News report that originally said Seth Rich was the one responsible for the WikiLeaks release of DNC emails during that 2016 campaign. But what a lot of people don't acknowledge is that Fox later retracted that story. And as we know, the Fox News of this time of 2016 is very different from the Fox News of 1996, right? And also, it's incredibly rare nowadays for mass media outfits to publish retractions, right? For a pundit to go, especially in entertainment news, which is what Fox legally is, it's increasingly rare for one of those pundits to say, we got this wrong, which is why you can see so many programs like Last Week Tonight or Daily Show pointing out obviously contradictory statements by some of those pundits.
It's still odd for me to think back about the Seth Rich story and how explosive the John Podesta emails were. I mean, it spawned an entire conspiracy theory like genre of Pizzagate, right? And just how damaging those emails were to the Clinton campaign in 2016. It did feel at the time like somebody was going to pay for it, right? Whether politically or physically. And then when Seth Rich was killed, I remember being less skeptical about it in the moment, about it being involved in some way with the Clinton campaign or the Democratic Party in some way. But looking back now from this far away, it does feel like the connection maybe is not as strong, especially given what you just stated about that Fox News story.
And again, the list continues to grow. One recent addition was Jeffrey Epstein, when he died under questionable circumstances in 2019. Check out our 3-part series on that. Look, without naming off all 50-something people brought up in these various lists, there's one question is most immediate to me, and it's something that's worth unpacking. Given that the U.S. president, whomever they are, in general, is one of the most scrutinized people in the world, like up there with the Pope and the Queen of England, and given that Clinton's political opponents successfully, meticulously nailed down every possible detail of anything that could take him down, take him from power, culminating in a non-political scandal like an extramarital affair, why would they have not used any one of these deaths as a perfect opportunity to put the nail in the coffin of his career, right? Obviously, they would have. That was part of their mission. Why were they not able to do so? Was there a cover-up? Did someone have dirt on every single GOP operative? Also, I want to say, in addition to Podesta, that sparked another conspiracy theory that has some even more plausible roots, which is WikiLeaks collusion with a couple of other third-party actors. But okay, so that's the thing. If it was there, if you could prove, forget 30, forget 50, if you could prove one, then you could end that career. Why didn't they? The other issues with this theory are this kind of a numbers game? I hate to say it. Any successful politician, let alone a career politician, who gets to be the president, they're going to have a much bigger social circle, right? They're in a lot more Rolodexes. They interact with many more people. And this leads me to the following statement. I want to see what you guys think. This might be a little cold, but it's worth saying. Unfortunately, at this point in our lives, everyone listening has probably known someone who passed away through some tragedy, right? And it is possible then that with the right cherry picking of facts, if you had a motivated enemy or opponent, how hard would it be for them to ascribe this death to you? It's cold to frame it that way, but it gives us a sense of the possible logical fallacies here. I mean, people have passed away. You are connected to them. How difficult is it to curate or remix the facts surrounding your relationship and the facts surrounding their death such that it looks like you were somehow involved? You think that's too crazy?
No, I think you're right, but also it feels way more suspicious when those people close to you who have died are responsible for protecting you, like bodyguards or Secret Service members, right, or people who would witness the places you go and the people you interact with because it's their job to know what you're doing when. I think that's why it feels so suspicious to everyone when you encounter some of the concepts or even the theories, no matter how loosely based they are on reality. Right? When you first read it and you first see it, you're like, oh wow, that would make sense. That bodyguard would have seen who he was with that night.
It's also easy to fall into the whole where there's smoke, there's fire fallacy, which, I mean, it can be true, certainly, but in this situation, it doesn't necessarily feel like it holds water. But you're right, man. I mean, there are people that are in close proximity or involved in things that would be inconvenient to, the Clintons. So it is easy to kind of, make that leap mentally.
It's talking specifically, I think, about the, and tell me if I'm off base here, specifically about the 12 or so Clinton bodyguards who are deceased. This is a good opportunity for us to talk a little bit about connections. 3 of those people, Brian Haney, Timothy Saville, and William Barclay, 4, Scott Reynolds as well. Now I think about it, they died in a helicopter crash in May of 1993. They were members of something called Marine Helicopter Squadron 1, responsible for transporting the president. They died when they were on a pretty much like a maintenance flight in a Black Hawk helicopter. Officially no evidence of sabotage, but Clinton, his association there is that he had been in that aircraft only one time, and it was 2 months earlier. And people know where he went. He went from the White House to the USS Theodore Roosevelt. So how solid is that connection? It's a question worth asking. It's also not the first time body counts have been used in this way.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. Especially when you look at each one individually. Like there's a Snopes article, Ben, that you mentioned in today's outline that points to the individual, humans, the accounts, right, of each person who's listed on these body counts. And if you look at it hard enough and you actually look at the information that's presented there in the circumstance, it gives you that feeling of, why would these people have been killed? The president had just gotten into the White House. Why would they all die in a helicopter accident like that? Why would that be a planned thing? It doesn't make sense. But if you just hear about it in passing without getting those details, it feels way more real.
And this, it's true. It's impactful, and it's built to be so, honestly. And this is not saying that people who were creating these lists were acting in bad faith. They may sincerely believe what they're saying. And, again, exercising humans' amazing gift for pattern recognition.